Hi students, in today's class we will study about Mauryan Empire. Mauryan Empire is very important because in our history it is the first empire, and later we see Gupta Empire, Delhi Sultanate Empire and Mughals Empire, then British Empire. For the first time in our history we had an empire which was controlling almost entire Indian subcontinent. During 6th century BCE, when Magadha was one of the 16 great Mahajanapadas, the territory was very small. Then after 6th century BCE, different leaders of Magadhan Empire and also the kind of resources at their disposal helped Magadhan kingdom to expand into different areas, and finally it became one of the largest empires in our Indian history. If we see here, this is how it started expanding from 6th century BC to 3rd century BCE. This is how by the time Ashoka became the ruler, almost entire subcontinent was under Mauryas. We have to study these things. For example, the kind of geography, what they are commanding, what kind of economic system they were maintaining, what kind of society they were living in, and how this vast country was administered by Mauryas. And also we see the contribution of Mauryans in art and culture dimension as well. Whenever it is required we use world map also, then Indian map we will use it. Let us see. Here Magadha was the small territory during 6th century BCE, later expanded into different directions from 6th century to 3rd century BCE. Let us start with the first ruler of Magadhan Empire. Empire name is Magadha, whereas dynasty name is Mauryan dynasty. Chandragupta Maurya. Let us take a sheet. The first ruler of Mauryas, Mauryan Empire. First ruler was Chandragupta Maurya. Next, Bindusara. Next, Ashoka the Great. Why we are calling the Great? Because of the policies of Ashoka. And later different rulers came. The last one, Brihadrada. Brihadrada. Finally, he was killed by his own commander, Pushyamitra Shunga. Pushyamitra Shunga was his commander. He killed Brihadrada and started Shunga dynasty. This is how. Before Chandragupta Maurya, Nanda dynasty was there. Chandragupta Maurya, he was the contemporary of Alexander. He was the contemporary of Alexander the Great. Let us see. When Nanda dynasty was there, Nanda Empire was controlling this much territory. When Alexander reached northwestern part of India, his soldiers do not want to enter into Magadhan Empire because they were afraid of the army strength of Nanda Empire. Nandas were maintaining very large army, mainly the elephants made the soldiers of Alexander very fearful, and also already they left their homes long ago because of homesick and also because of the climate. Here the northwestern part of India is a hot climate, they were disease ridden, homesick ridden, and apart from that, the enemy of Alexander, Nanda Empire, was very huge and also very powerful. All these factors made Alexander not to cross into the Indian subcontinent. He conquered most of these northwestern part of India, then he made part of his empire. Around this time period, Chandragupta Maurya was there. According to one tradition, Chandragupta Maurya was observing the military tactics of Alexander also. Then he learned some of the military tactics from Alexander. He used those tactics against against Nanda Empire. Starting from Chandragupta Maurya, now when Ashoka became the emperor, this almost entire Indian subcontinent was under Mauryan Empire. We will see, this is geography. Now, for understanding different aspects like economy, in order to understand economy, society, art and culture, administration, let us see the geographical outposts or important towns and areas within the empire. First, here is the Pataliputra. Pataliputra was the capital of Mauryan Empire. Here is Takshila. Then here Girnar. Here Toshali. In south, here Maski, Brahmagiri, such kind of there. Mauryans called this area as Suvarnagiri. In this area, gold mines were there, kolar mines. Suvarnagiri was the name given to southern province, and in the middle, Ujjain. These are important cities under Mauryan Empire. These are outposts also. This is northwestern, Kabul, Kandahar. Till Kandahar, the empire of Mauryas reached. Starting with Pataliputra, then gradually it expanded into different areas. Considering that these are all part of Mauryan Empire. Chandragupta Maurya, according to one tradition, he started expanding or he started conquering the territories from northwest. First he conquered around this time period already. These areas were under now Greeks. Before Greeks, remember in Iranian and Greek invasions chapter, we have studied that before Greeks, Persians or Achaemenid Iranian people. Achaemenid Empire was the name of Iranian Empire. They reached for the first time northwestern part of India. Because of them, Kharosthi script also developed. After Achaemenid Empire, Alexander conquered entire Iranian Empire and he reached northwestern part of India, and all these areas became part of Greek Empire. Now Iranians no more, all are Greeks. Later we called them as part of Indo-Greeks. Chandragupta Maurya, starting from Takshila, northwestern part of the region, he conquered continuously and he reached Pataliputra with the help of his advisor Kautilya. Once capital was under him, then he started administering according to the advices of Kautilya. Kautilya has given one of the finest statecrafts in the form of Ardhashastra. According to the rules of Ardhashastra, even though Ardhashastra is giving theory, we do not exactly know how many principles of Ardhashastra were followed by Chandragupta Maurya and his successors. However, Chanakya was his advisor. According to his advisor, Chandragupta Maurya was ruling. This is the geography. Some important issues related to Chandragupta Maurya we have to remember. These are important for prelims point of view. Here there is a Mysore or Shravana Belagola. From Pataliputra, here some of the important issues we have to see which may come in prelims examination point of view. Entire this structure of the class is to help you how you can understand Mauryan Empire. If any mains question come in Mauryan Empire, remember the geography, remember imagine Indian map, then you see different important centers of Mauryan Empire, then you can easily connect different aspects, you will remember for long time period. And we should know some important facts also related to each and every individual ruler. Now we are Chandragupta Maurya, we are starting. We will see some of the important facts about Chandragupta Maurya. Pataliputra was the capital. Now remember, we are in 320s. Around 321, 322 or some say 324, he was the emperor of Magadhan Empire. Around 320 BC, he was ruling. During this time period, now you see already around 300 years ago, Buddhism was there in the form of Buddhism and Jainism. Buddhism and Jainism were born in this particular location around 300 years before this particular age. Here Chandragupta Maurya, he was influenced by Jainism most. Jainism. Here two important people were there regarding Jainism. Two important teachers around this time. One is Bhadrabahu. Another one is Stulabhadra. Two important Jaina monks were there. Chandragupta Maurya was influenced more from Bhadrabahu. Both Chandragupta Maurya and Bhadrabahu, during the lifetime of Chandragupta, he renounced his throne and he gave the throne to his son Bindusara. Then he went to Mysore region, Shravana Belagala, where he went to fast unto death. That we are calling it as Sallekana. It is a practice of Jainism. He died after practicing Sallekana. This is important for prelims. Who practiced, which Mauryan ruler practiced Sallekana? Chandragupta Maurya. Who was his teacher? Bhadrabahu. Another important monk, Stulabhadra. Here, because of Bhadrabahu and Stulabhadra, Jainism split into two things. The sect under Bhadrabahu became Digambaras. The sect under Stulabahu became Shvetambaras. According to one tradition, When there was a huge famine in this particular area in the northwest, in the capital region and in the eastern part of the Gangetic plain, some of the followers of Jainism under Bhadrabahu along with Chandragupta Maurya, they went to south, they performed Sallekana and they propagated Jainism principles in this area. Some people were remaining there under Stulabhadra, and the people Stulabhadra, they were wearing white cloth. Because of this, they were called Shvetambaras, and under Bhadrabahu, they practiced even more rigorous form of Jainism, more ascetic form of Jainism, more simple life. Even they renounced their clothes also. Because of this, they were called Digambaras and Shvetambaras. You have to remember Chandragupta Maurya, he practiced Sallekana. Sallekana was part of Jainism tradition. Under Bhadrabahu, he came to Shravanabelagala, then he practiced Sallekana and he died. The people who came to South India under Bhadrabahu, they became Digambaras. Under Stulabhadra, whoever resided in Pataliputra region, they became Shvetambaras. These are two important aspects for prelims point of view. And this is about life story of Chandragupta Maurya. Later, Bindusara became Bindusara, and here Kautilya was his advisor. These things we have to remember. Next, Bindusara came. We do not have much information about Bindusara. Bindusara, he had only one thing is, according to different traditions, one tradition said he expanded his territory into different areas and he had good relations with foreign countries. He maintained good foreign relations, particularly Greeks. Already by this time, the northwestern part of India under Greeks, so he maintained good relations with the neighbors. Chandragupta Maurya, he conquered northwestern part of India also. Under his lifetime, the military, he expanded, he founded the Mauryan Empire and also he expanded till Kandahar. Kandahar was actually Greek territory. Both Greeks and Chandragupta Maurya had a conflict. Now Chandragupta Maurya won over Greeks. Because of this victory, he conquered Kandahar region. And according to one tradition, even Greeks maintained good relations with Chandragupta Maurya. Chandragupta Maurya also married a princess of Greek, Helen, named Helen. And Greeks sent an ambassador to the court of Chandragupta Maurya. This ambassador was Megasthenes. Megasthenes, he was the ambassador of Greek. This region was under Seleucus Nicator. If we observe the world map, immediately after the death of Alexander, Alexander conquered many areas. Unfortunately, he could not rule over the kingdom. He died at very young age. After his death, his commanders split the empire into 4 different parts. Here in the Greek region, one part, Asian another part, Egypt region, and small regions here, different parts they divided. When the time Ashoka came, we hear about 5 different principalities of this entire Greek. One is Macedonia, one is Syria based Seleucus Nicator, Seleucid Empire, Another one, Egypt. One said Epirus, Cyrene and Epirus. Different kingdoms emerged out of Alexander Empire. Here northwestern part of India came under Seleucid Empire, name was Seleucus Nicator. He was the ruler when Chandragupta Maurya was ruling in the Indian subcontinent. War between them, Seleucus Nicator defeated. After defeating Seleucus Nicator, Chandragupta Maurya expanded his territory till Kandahar. To maintain good relations, Seleucus Nicator sent an ambassador, his name Megasthenes. Megasthenes has written a book called Indica when he was in the Pataliputra. Pataliputra was the capital. Megasthenes came to the capital of Mauryan Empire. He observed Chandragupta Maurya's administration and other socio-economic elements of Mauryan Empire. He has written all his observations in a book called Indica. Actually, he did not write Indica. He observed and he has written some observations. Unfortunately, these observations were not there as he was written. Later, his writings were quoted by different Greek writers and Roman writers. Finally, all these scattered elements were compiled in the form of Indica. So, Indica is associated with Megasthenes. This is important for prelims point of view. Indica was written by Megasthenes. Megasthenes was the ambassador of Seleucus Nicator to the court of Chandragupta Maurya. After Chandragupta Maurya, Bimbisara came. Naturally, he maintained good relations with Greek principalities. We know only this much about Bindusara. Later, Ashoka comes. Ashoka, according to one tradition, Bimbisara was having many sons. Ashoka patronized Buddhism in his lifetime. Many Buddhist literatures mention about Ashoka life. We get information about Ashoka from different Buddhist sources. For example, Sri Lanka, two important sources from Sri Lanka. One is Dipavamsha and Mahavamsha. Two important Buddhist sources are there. It gives information, they give information about Ashoka life story. According to one story, one legend. Legend means it's a story. We do not exactly know whether it is happened or not. According to legend, Ashoka killed 99 of his brothers and finally he became emperor. It shows he was initially very angry, bloodthirsty tyrant. If we believe this happened, that means he was very angry and he was bloodthirsty tyrant. So Bindusara was having many sons and finally there was a civil war after the death of Bimbisara. Bimbisara time period is 297 BC to 272 BC. Ashoka came 268 to till 232. He became emperor in 268. Bimbisara died in 272. That means 4 years. 4 years there could be a civil war. Probably there was a civil war in the empire. Finally, Ashoka became the emperor. This is the empire. Now Ashoka became the emperor. During his lifetime, he conquered one area, that is Kalinga region. Kalinga was still out of Mauryan influence. He invaded Kalinga and he conquered Kalinga also. Kalinga became part of Mauryan Empire. Now you see, one of the reasons for Kalinga, the conquest of Kalinga, was the economic reason. Here they were having, Mauryans were having Tamralipti. It is a port. Here Bharuch. Pataliputra was Shasharam, then Ujjain, then Bharuch, then South India. It went to different parts. Madura region, Ujjain region. It was connected. Different road networks were there. When goods were reaching to South India was also under Mauryan. It has to follow the ship route or land route. Now the trade route between Pataliputra and South India was frequently disturbed by the presence of Kalinga kingdom. In order to make Kalinga also part of Mauryan Empire, he invaded and he made part of Mauryan Empire. Now entire subcontinent was under Mauryas. Now you see, this is how during Nanda time period it was the one. Now when Ashoka 250 BC means Ashoka, entire Indian subcontinent was under Mauryan Empire. So this is one aspect, under what circumstances he became the emperor. 99 of his brothers were killed by him according to one Buddhist legend. We do not exactly know whether this happened or not. Then he became the emperor. However, one thing sure we can say that initially he was very angry also, very aggressive in nature and very bloodthirsty tyrant, we can say, we can observe from these developments, because Kalinga war is the real thing that took place around 260 or 261 BC. Kalinga war around 260 or 261 BC. This is the time period of Kalinga war. Immediately around 7 or 8 years after his accession, then he conducted this war. One of the greatest developments took place after this Kalinga war. Observe here, this was the age of expansionism. Here Alexander, before him Achaemenid Empire like Cyrus, Darius, Xerxes. These people were inspired in order to expand into large territories. Alexander, he wanted to become a world conqueror, entire world under Alexander. Within India also, people started fighting against their neighbors and expanded their territories into different parts of the country. This was the age of imperialism. This was the age of wars and battles. Ashoka won the war. Generally, if any soldier, if he wins a victory in the war, then it emboldens him. Then he wanted to further do wars, further battles, and he wanted to expand his territory. However, in case of Ashoka, that did not happen. He renounced the war. This policy, the war policy, he called Bheri Ghosha. He wanted to convert, or he wanted to follow Dhamma Ghosha instead of Bheri Ghosha. If he wants, now you see, entire subcontinent is under Ashoka, lot of resources under him. If he believes in war and conquest, he would have conquered other areas as well. The kind of resources at his feet now, more comparing with his grandfather, and his father. Now, like Alexander the Great, he also would have gone for world conquest, considering the kind of resources at his disposal. And he also won the war. That is very important. He was not defeated in the war. He won the war. Definitely, it would embolden him, and he would have taken the world conquest as his mission. However, he wanted to conquer the world in a different way. That's why Ashoka became the great, Ashoka the Great. He wanted to conquer not through military, not through Beri-Ghosha policy, but through Dhamma-Ghosha policy. It is a peaceful policy. It is violent policy. Through peaceful means, he wanted to conquer the world. That's why he has given an example, he set an example to the future of humanity. He set an example to the human beings itself. Not only to Indians, but to the entire world itself, he set an example how to win over hearts of the people. This made Ashoka the great in our entire history. We see very few such people in our entire human history. In case of India, we see Ashoka the Great. Another ruler in medieval India, Akbar the Great. We use the epithet the Great for Akbar also. What made him to follow Beri-Ghosha, Dhamma-Ghosha instead of Beri-Ghosha? Here is the, now map will help us. Already we have mentioned that this is 320, already 300 years passed when Jainism and Buddhism was already there in the Indian subcontinent. We will take a new map, fresh map. This one, already Buddhism, Jainism. These places, Buddhism, Lumbini, the birthplace of Buddha, Vardhamana Mahavira, Kundagrama, his grandfather also, we are talking about Ashoka. His grandfather also followed Jainism. The principles of Buddhism and Jainism spread in every part of the country by this time period. Along with that, Brahmanical, along with that, many sects. Now by this time period, in 6th century BCE itself, we had around 60 sects are there. Now by the time of 3rd century BCE, we are talking about 250 BC. By 250 BC, hundreds of such sects, already there, different thoughts, different philosophies, different lifestyles. This diverse nature of people already entrenched the Indian subcontinent by this time period. We are talking around 250 BC. In 6th century BC itself, revolts against Brahmanical domination and Brahmanical rituals, new religions like Buddhism, Jainism emerged. Now, by this time period, so many other religious thoughts also emerged. And one more important, within Buddhism, there were different sects. Within Buddhism itself, again splits. In Jainism also, we have seen Shvetambara, Digambaras, such kind of ideas. Now, within Buddhism, many sects. Within Jainism, so many sects. Within Brahmanical community, we have seen before the emergence of Buddhism itself, Upanishadic thought influenced different sections of people within Brahmanical community, Brahmanical religion. You can see a lot of sects, lot of ideas, philosophies. Now, when such kind of diverse elements are there in the country, One cannot unify the people with force. He has chosen peaceful means. Only through peaceful means these people can be integrated. In terms of ideas, now in terms of geography also, northwestern part, western part, southern part, eastern part, central part, different geographies having different aspirations, different ideas, and different requirements according to the local needs. Here is the reason why he followed Dhammagosha instead of Bheri having this idea itself a revolutionary for 2nd 3rd century BCE. Imagining or visualizing that people of this much diverse nature cannot be unified with force, only through peaceful means it had to be integrated. Having this idea itself was a revolutionary, and that made him the great. He prescribed Dhamma, how to conduct in life. It is a code of conduct. It is not particularly related to Buddhism. According to one tradition, Ashoka propagated Buddhism. No, he has taken good elements from each and every idea or philosophy. Then he created his own code of conduct that he wanted his people to follow. Similar kind of developments we see in case of Akbar also. When Akbar was there, in the western coast, even Portuguese were there. Christianity, now Christian missionaries came. Islam is there. In Islam itself, Sunni, Shia, Sufism. Then in case of Christianity, different ideas. And by this time period, already Brahmanical ideas were there, Jainism ideas were there, Zoroastrianism, Parsis also entered, and by the 6th and 7th century AD, Parsi religion or Zoroastrianism also there in the country. So many religious ideas even during Akbar time period. He also followed similar kind of policy that made Akbar the great. But for the first time to the humanity in our Indian subcontinent, Ashoka set an example. Because of all these reasons, society, that's why we started with saying this society, always remember the Indian map, you will come to know Indian map and the time period. And also you should connect what has happened earlier. Always start with the Stone Age, how people were living in the Stone Age, hunting and gathering, then Indus, then Vedic civilization, agriculture, then Mahajanapada period, town life, different sects, different ideas, different philosophies emerged in the form of Buddhism and Jainism. Society, because of all these policies, he followed Dhamma policy. We have seen geography also. Now we see the economy. Economy wise, these are various different parts of the country. Pataliputra, they were having ports also. This is Tamralipti. This is Broch. In middle, Ujjain was there. Pataliputra was connected to Ujjain, Ujjain to Broch. Now Mauryans exported to the other countries. Here they exported into different countries. These ports are used to reach South India as well. Again, this South India was having different road connectivity also. Here Shravasti, Vaishali, Shravasti, Kalsi. This is Kalsi. Then Takshila. Then Kandahar. This is also part of, now it connects with West Asia, it connects with Central Asia. Here there is Madura region, Ujjain region. This part is called Uttarapada. Uttarapada, this part Dakshinapada. One connects road network of North India and south is Dakshinapada. We are talking about economy. Uttarapada, Dakshinapada, you see the kind of roadway network, communications developed very well. So many towns, you see lot of towns here. Pataliputra, Madura, Ujjain, Broch, Tamralipti, Suvarnagiri, here Maski, Brahmagiri. Towns. Agriculture also developed. We have seen the foundation for the urban civilization was the strong agriculture base. In 6th century itself, the rise of Magadha Janapada, the reason behind the rise of Magadha Empire was strong agriculture base. During Mauryan time period also, they followed agriculture intensely. This agriculture base gave them lot of taxes. It gave rise to different artisans industry. Trade, because of already communication networks already there, trade flourished. It led to made the existing towns very strong, led to the creation of new towns. All these developments were taking place as part of economic development during Mauryan time period. They have taken the advantage of now already Chota Nagpur area is a mining area, iron mines, south also gold mines, different mines also exploited by the Mauryan Empire. Ardhashastra, Kautilya's Ardhashastra mentions each and every detail how to make a strong economic base for a strong state. In order to maintain a very strong state, one should maintain a very strong economy. According to Ardhashastra, each and every resource should be utilized for the welfare of the state. All these made Mauryan Empire very strong. So ideologically, in the form of Ardhashastra, how a statecraft should be maintained, already philosophically, ideologically, it has strongly driven, and also the kind of natural resources at their disposal made Mauryan Empire very powerful, one of the very powerful kingdoms, not only in India but in the entire world itself. This is what economy. Through agriculture for the first time, here they used the servants or slaves. In case of agriculture, new lands were brought into cultivation. New lands, this is already, you can see, this area is north region is alluvial soil. Always remember the geographic aspect. While studying history, you cannot ignore geography. New lands brought into agriculture. Under these new lands, there are two types of lands. One is state lands, another one is private lands. State lands were called Sita. State lands or crown lands, you can say crown lands. Private lands, peasants, farmers. They pay the taxes to the state. In case of crown lands, they used prisoners of war. In case of Kalinga War, Ashoka used the prisoners of Kalinga War and he made work under crown lands. They produced and this produce became a part of natural resource for the state treasury. Through agriculture, this is how they enhanced the taxation system. Then it also led to industry. As agriculture is gaining more strength, need new tools, agriculture tools, so many artisans. It is also a culture state. Culture means promoting art and architecture. Art and architecture requires a lot of skills. Now all these engineering skills also developed by the people of Mauryan Empire. In this way, industry developed. Now mining also, natural resources they mined, used for the benefit of state. These developments led to the creation of a strong trade. People were taking the goods into different towns. Already by this time period, communication networks emerged, trade networks emerged. They took to the South India or northwestern part of India to different ports like Tamaralipti, Broch ports. Port networks also developed, road networks also developed. Forests were cleared for communication purpose. Forests were cleared. This cleared forest, one way it is useful for creating new lands for agriculture and another one using for road networks. This is how a strong economic base was there in case of Mauryan Empire. How all these are happening? Now economy part also we have seen. Now let us come to the polity and administration. Having this much geographic land, having these many activities, they were following a very strong administrative setup. A strong administration. Each and every part of the economic activity was utilized for the benefit of state. Now in case of agriculture, we have seen taxes. Generally 1/4 or 1/6 of the produce was taken as the tax. In case of artisans, also paid the tax. In case of trade, toll tax was imposed. In case of mines, it's complete monopoly. Only state can utilize the resources of mining. Through all these developments, state was getting a lot of resources. In addition to that, already diverse people were there, different religions, different sects, different geographical aspirations. On one hand, because of these, now administration system, you should require administrators or strong bureaucracy in order to maintain all these economic and social developments. For example, agriculture, Adhyaksha or economic activities were under an officer called Adhyaksha. Sita was the land, crown land. The administrator or officer who is taking care of crown lands was called Sita Adhyaksha. Toll tax, Shulka Adhyaksha. Ports, Nava Adhyaksha. Weights and measures. This trade requires common weights and measures. across the empire, Paunatadhyaksha. Such kind of officers were recruited, and through these officers, Mauryan emperors were ruling the country. This was a complete centralized administration. Remember, this is 3rd century BC. Today itself, maintaining a central administration is a difficult task. In 3rd century BC itself, Mauryans followed central administration. Through central administration, they tried to control different economic activities and social developments. When it comes to Ashoka, he recruited officers called Dhamma Mahamatras. Dhamma Mahamatras, they were the officers to propagate peace or the code of conduct into the people. For different economic activity and different social activity, Mauryans recruited officers and they administered very efficiently. This was one of the examples Mauryans showed to the future generations. Administration is done. Economy, administration. Initially, we started with Chandragupta Maurya. This is how what was the development during the time period of Mauryans. The neighbors, world level developments. Chandragupta Maurya, he started his empire. Then he conquered from northwestern part and gradually different areas. After him, some of the important facts related to Chandragupta Maurya, Bimbisara, the later Ashoka came. When Ashoka came, Dhamma Gosha or Bheri instead of Beri Gosha, he followed Dhamma Gosha. That is one of the hallmark of Ashoka's administration. After having this much information, now we see one important area which is useful for prelims point of view. That is with respect to sources of Mauryan Empire. If I start immediately the first itself sources, it becomes difficult. Now after knowing this much, then we can easily remember the sources as well. Sources are very important in case of Mauryan Empire. Start with Chandragupta Maurya. What are the sources we have? Start with Chandragupta Maurya. One is Ardhashastra. Naturally, Kautilya's Ardhashastra is one of the important source for studying Mauryan history. Second one, Megasthenes. During the lifetime of Chandragupta Maurya, Megasthenes was the ambassador of Seleucus Nicator, Greek Empire. Megasthenes. Then Jainism sources, because Chandragupta Maurya followed Jainism practices. Bhadrabahu, Shravanabelagola, Sallekana. This part of history we are getting from Jainism sources, Jaina literature. These are three important sources when it comes to Chandragupta Maurya. In case of Bimbisara, some sources are mentioning about Buddhist sources. When it comes to Ashoka, we have Buddhist sources. Buddhist sources, in case of Sri Lanka was having two important, Deepavamsha and Mahavamsha, two sources. And also Buddhist sources means we get different. Sri Lanka, Huansong. Hinsong, he visited country in 7th century AD. He talked about Buddhism and the contribution of Ashoka. This is one important source for Ashoka's life. Buddhist sources. Most importantly, Ashoka himself has given evidence about him in the form of inscriptions. Here we are trying to understand chronology wise during Chandragupta Maurya, what was his life and who were the people involved in his lifetime, and the sources. When it comes to Ashoka, what was his contribution and how the Buddhist resources used Ashoka's life story as their legends. Ashoka himself has given inscriptions because he was following Dhammagosha. Now he wanted to propagate Dhammagosha to every part of the country. He issued inscriptions. This is like a modern day constitution. Constitution is having a lot of articles in the constitution. Inscriptions also having number of articles. For example, major rock edicts, we are calling them as major rock edicts. There were 14 articles, and we calling them as pillar edicts. There were 7 articles in number. So he issued pillar inscriptions also, he issued rock inscriptions also. We study about inscriptions in detail now. Here our focus is during Chandragupta Maurya. These are the important sources. We are getting information from Mauryas, about Mauryas. During Ashoka, Buddhist sources and his own inscriptions are very important. In the other way, we can remember the sources in a different way. Here, about Chandragupta Maurya and Kautilya, later, these are we are talking about during the lifetime of emperors. But after Mauryan Empire, post-Mauryan Empire came, Gupta Empire came. During those times also, some people were talking about Mauryan Empire. For example, Mudra Rakshasa. It was written by Vishakhadatta. Vishakhadatta did not belong to Mauryan period. He belonged to later period. Still he was talking about Mauryas. He has written a book called Mudra Rakshasa. This is having the story about Chandragupta Maurya and Kautilya, how they strengthened their empire and how they got the empire, how they built a strong empire. Mudra Rakshasa, Vishakhadatta is also important. For prelims point of view, Mudra Rakshasa is written by Vishakhadatta. Megasthenes, he has written, that is Indica. Ardhashastra, Kautilya. Important, the Chinese traveler, Huansong. Inscriptions, major rock and pillar edicts, and he also gave cave rock, cave edict. During his lifetime, he issued one cave edict as well. So, major rock edict, pillar edicts, and cave edicts. These are all important sources. This is one way of remembering the sources, lifetime wise. Along with these two, there are Brahmanical sources as well. Brahmanical sources, they are Puranas. Puranas mention about Mauryas. There is another way of remembering the sources. One is indigenous sources. Second one, foreign sources. This way is explained to you in order to understand through chronology. If we know who are the people involved and what are his policies, it becomes easy to understand. Now, another way of remembering sources, one is indigenous. In case of indigenous, once again, Brahmanical or Sanskrit texts. Second one, Buddhist. Then Jaina. One way. When it comes to foreign sources, who are the contemporaries of Mauryas? Greeks. Greek sources. Later Greeks, Romans came. Some Roman sources also mentioned about Mauryas. Roman sources. Then Sri Lanka sources. Then Chinese sources. This is another way of remembering the sources related to Mauryan Empire. When it comes to Greek, Megasthenes will come here, Indica. We have to remember all these because these are often asked in the prelims examination. Megasthenes. When it comes to Sanskrit, Ardhashastra, Kautilya, Vishakadatta, Mudra Rakshasa. Not only Vishakadatta, even during 11th and 12th centuries, there is a writer called Kalhana. He has written a book called Rajatarangani. He belonged to Kashmir region. According to Rajatarangani, he said Srinagar, today's Srinagar of Jammu and Kashmir, was built by Ashoka. This information comes from Kalhana's Rajatarangani. When it comes to Buddhist texts, so many Buddhist texts like Ashokavadana, such kind of things are there. Jaina sources like Hemachandra. Hemachandra, he belonged to Western India in Solankis, Gujarat region. He has written a book, Hemachandra. Hemachandra has mentioned about Sallekana practice of Chandragupta Maurya. These are the some sources. When it comes to Greek, Megasthenes and also Justin, another. In case of Roman, Pliny. Sri Lanka, Mahavamsha, Deepavamsha. Chinese, Traveler. Travelers mention about these sources. Now, indigenous, these are in case of, once again, these are literary sources. In case of literary sources, indigenous sources and foreign sources. When it comes to archaeology, we have inscriptions, we have a fort in Pataliputra, Kumrahar, like forts, caves. These are some of the evidences to study about Mauryas. Caves are important. During the lifetime of Ashoka, as we know, there are so many sects, Brahmanical, Buddhism, Jainism. There is one kind of sect, that is Ajivika. While we are studying about Buddhism and Jainism, we studied about Ajivika. They believed in fatalism. That means whatever is happening in this country, in this lifetime of people, already predetermined. No matter what, you cannot change the fate. Ashoka, he donated caves in Barabar caves, and his grandson Dasharatha, he also donated some caves. They are in Nagarjuni Hills. Barabar caves, this is a group of caves, group of hills. Barabar caves and his grandson Dasharatha, Nagarjuni Hills, they are donated for Ajivaka sect. These are important caves during the lifetime of Ashoka. These caves were for the first time in our history, for the first time cave architecture developed during Ashoka. These are the first time caves were built. These caves were for the purpose of helping Ajivaka sect. In order to promote his ideas about his Dhamma, he gave a lot of inscriptions. So this is another way of remembering the sources. When it comes to literary, indigenous sources and foreign sources. When it comes to archaeology, inscription, forts, caves. This is one way of remembering sources. This is one way of remembering sources. This is what happened in the Chandragupta. This is the reason why I explained you what happened during the lifetime of Chandragupta Maurya and what happened during the lifetime of Ashoka. If you remember this story, you can easily connect different developments, and for the brain also it becomes easy to recollect and answer the questions in prelims examination. Chandragupta Maurya, you remember Chandragupta Maurya's life story. Then who are the people involved? Always remember the world Indian map and world map also. Indian map, different geographical locations, different people involved in the lifetime of Chandragupta Maurya, neighbors. When you remember all these things, then it will not be difficult to remember the facts related to Chandragupta Maurya. The story of Ashoka, if you know, then so many things you will come to know. Under what circumstances he became the emperor, what are the social conditions. When there were so many sects, he wanted to unify all these diverse elements into single state. That means force cannot be used. It is not sustainable. So he used peaceful means, that is Dhamma. So far, okay, we have studied. Generally, we should start with the sources of Mauryan history. Generally, when we are studying about Mauryas, any text or any notebook start with the sources. What are the sources for Mauryas? Here we have dealt about sources in the end, because if you know the geography, if you know the society of Mauryas, if you know administrative style, art and architecture, and other life stories of different emperors, understanding sources becomes easy. Now, after knowing all this, we have to give special focus to the inscriptions. Now we are going into that area. Sources we are entering. Now in sources, inscriptions give lot of details about Ashoka life story, and these are also important in case of our prelims examination. Now we have already seen what are the outposts. In case of administration, they have divided the entire Mauryan empire into 4 different parts. One is the western part, they made different areas. One is like Ujjain as the base, one province, and Pataliputra province. We cannot easily say one is Ujjain important, one is Takshila. These northwestern parts came under one province, that is northwestern part, that is Takshila, Gandhara region. Here Kalinga region, Toshali. Here they called this province as Suvarnagiri. We do not know the exact capital of this particular province. Whereas in case of central and western, Ujjain, Takshila and Toshali. We have other ports also, some ports like Tamralipti, Broch, Girnar Hill, Sopara. Ports are Sopara, Broch, Tamralipti, and other some important areas here, Girnar. Toshali, here in the north part, Kalsi. Here it is Pataliputra. If we know these areas, remembering inscriptions also becomes easy. When it comes to inscriptions, he issued different type of inscriptions. We understood what was the purpose of issuing inscriptions. He wanted to renounce policy of war and he wanted to promote a policy of peaceful mean, that is Dhammagosha. Now he has to tell the people that the policy of Ashoka, what is his policy and what are his ideas of state. He chose the rocks and pillars as means to propagate these ideals. In the modern terms, we can say it is constitution. Now constitution now created by the rulers. Now again people should know what are the ideas of the constitution. Today we should know what are our rights, what are our duties, and how our government is running. Similarly, Ashoka has chosen rocks as one means and also pillars another means to propagate his ideas. Once again, based on the rock size, we categorized into two things. One is minor rock, another one is major rock. Here also minor pillar, major pillar. Four important things: rocks, pillars, minor rock, major rock. Here most important for us major rocks, minor rocks and major pillar. These are different important inscriptions. When it comes to major rock, 14 items, or you can say 14 points in the simple language. In technical words, we should call like 14 edicts, or even more simpler, 14 articles. We can call, for remembering 14 points we can remember, and 14 articles. While writing examination, we should write 14 edicts, 14 major rock edicts. In case of major, 7 pillar edicts, 7 articles. Minor pillar, 3 edicts. These are number of edicts: 3 pillar edicts, 14 major rock edicts, 7 pillar edicts are given by Ashoka. Some minor pillar edicts also he has given, and they are like inscriptions. Now what is the difference between inscription and edict? Edict is also inscription. Inscription means writing something on hard surface. It could be any kind of writing. Writing a king name, writing about any festival, or writing about any development, writing. When it comes to edict, it is a royal proclamation. It has a purpose. It is like a legislation of in the modern sense. It's like a legislation. So we are calling writing a piece, writing article is different, writing a legislation is different. So edict is like royal proclamation. He issued the royal proclamations through rocks and pillars, minor rock and major rock. Here minor means small rocks. Here major means large rocks. You can understand here 3 edicts, small rock is enough. Here 14 edicts, you need large rock. Only difference is the size of the rock. Here also minor pillar, small one, and large pillar. 7 important edicts. Only size difference, nothing else. Is this clear? Inscription and edict. The difference between inscription and edict. Edict means royal proclamation. That's why we have to call the inscriptions of Ashoka as royal edicts or edicts. Major rock edicts. Major rock inscriptions also we can say, but to be specific, they are royal proclamations, 14 rock edicts, 7 pillar edicts. Now what are the contents of this and in which locations we find these? That is the next major point. We have seen the boundaries. Kandahar. Let us see the map here. You see the map. Kandahar, Sopara, Girnar, Barugacha, Tamralipti, Toshali. These all Suvarnagiri, part of Suvarnagiri. There you will find so many things. Maski, Brahmagiri, Sannati, Rajula Mandagiri, different areas. And here you will see Ujjain, Sanchi, Kalsi, Takshila. We have mentioned here, we have referred to only few important areas. When it comes to this map, you will find a lot of areas. And these northern Gangetic plains are connected by Uttarapada. Southern part is connected by Dakshinapada. So, grand trunk road of North India, trunk road of South India. You can remember that way. These are different areas and different geographical action. Inscriptions. Now, let us start with 14 major rock edicts. Or the whatever, all the, you take all, combinedly we will take like edicts. The main principles are about, now it is a diverse society. Now he talked about family relations. In family, elders should be respected. Start with the family individual. He is asking people, or he is giving royal proclamation to the people that I, Devanampiya Piyadasi. He referred himself as Devanampiya Piyadasi. Only few inscriptions, only in few places we see like Devanampiya Piyadasi Ashoka or Devanampiya Ashoka. The term Ashoka is discovered only in few places. In all the other areas we find like Devanampiya or Devanampiya Piyadasi or simply Piyadasi. He is declaring himself. It's like taking the pledge, I, Mr. and taking the pledge, like that. He is giving the royal proclamation. And he said, I, Devanampiya Piyadasi, wants people to respect elders. We are categorizing what are the essence of the edicts. Then he asked other different kind of sects to respect the other sects. We have seen it is the 3rd century BCE. Buddhism, Jainism, Brahmanical text, different ideas, different philosophies. Now, already some kind of violence, people are diminishing other sect and to try to promote the other sect. Within Buddhism also some kind of differences came. Mahasangika, Theravada, two kind of differences came. One is Mahasangika, another one is Theravada. What kind of philosophy or how Buddhism should be propagated to the people? They themselves fought once again schism, splitting in the Sangha itself. Buddhism, the Sangha is all the people of Buddhist monks joined together, the combined. The people are called Sangha, group of Buddhist monks. There is a splitting in the case of Buddhist Sangha. Similarly, one sect is diminishing another sect and not respecting others and kind of violence. He propagated non-violence. People should follow non-violent methods and people should respect the other sect. And he said in one of his inscriptions that if you diminish other religious belief, you are really harming your own religion. It is not that you are harming the other person, you are also harming your own religion itself. You see the beauty of his ideas. Today we are calling them as secular principles. Compare with modern sense. Now how relevant. He gave these ideas in 3rd century BCE. Even in 21st century also, still we are following similar kind of principles. To maintain proper law and order in the society, proper peace in the society and proper growth or welfare of the people. We are calling them as secular. Secular means all people should respect the other religions. One should not diminish other religion. Brotherhood we are calling. Our preamble has some of these words: secular, brotherhood, respecting the others, and freedom of thought. equality. Generally, our preamble was inspired from French Revolution. Equality, liberty, equality, fraternity. Equality, liberty, fraternity. These are the terms, mantra of French Revolution. In our Indian history itself, in the case of Maurya, he propagated some of these ideals in his lifetime. Article 14, equality of the Constitution. Article 19 of the Constitution, right to freedom, right to equality. So these are the principles Ashoka propagated. Respect the other. So freedom of religion. Brotherhood, he propagated brotherhood, non-violence. And also he wanted administrative things also, like Dhamma Mahamatras. He said to people that he is creating officers also to propagate these ideals. And he mentioned about his neighbors as well. In some of his inscriptions, he mentioned about who are his neighbors. Satyaputra, Chola, Pandya, Kerala Putras. He mentioned in some of the inscriptions. He mentioned about the other people in Greek. We have seen in Greek, after Alexander the Great, his empire divided into different principalities. In Syria, Seleucus Nicator and his successors. In Egypt, in Epirus, in Macedonia. In one of his inscriptions, he mentioned about all these kingdoms in his inscriptions. So it is giving information about the foreigners. It is giving inscription about what are the other kingdoms within the state. Now you remember, he wanted Dhamma Gosha. If he was following Beri Gosha, he would have conquered these areas through arms. Through military force, he would have conquered these areas, but he left them. He wanted to respect and he left it, and he followed Dhamma Gosha, and he propagated peaceful means to integrate people. This is how for the first time in our history a pan-Indian perspective will come, that is Bharata Khanda. A kind of pan-Indian perspective, unity and integrity, and also unity in diversity. These are the modern concepts which we are trying to propagate in order to make Indian country a very big and large, strong country. This unity in diversity, unity and integrity. Ashoka, he propagated these ideals in his lifetime. Therefore, the essence of edicts are about family, respecting elders, respecting others, following non-violence. He also said about the principles like not to kill animals. He propagated non-violent methods of lifestyle. He mentioned about neighbors also, in northwestern part of India who were there, in deep south who were there. All these things we are getting from edicts. Ashoka edicts, major rock edicts and major pillar edicts. So the essence is almost the same in all the parts of the edicts. Now, in which locations we find these rock edicts and pillar edicts? Here also there is geographical difference between those two. If you observe major rock edicts, the major rocks, and also chronology wise also, in the beginning of his administration, he started issuing minor rock edicts because small rocks were used and only few edicts were there. Then he enlarged his ideas and he made 3 edicts into 14 edicts. Then he used major rock edict. However, these rock edicts are found in the same locations and he used within the same location. When it comes to pillars, he actually manufactured the pillars. These rocks, in the places wherever they are identified, they have chosen the major rock and is inscribed. When it comes to pillars, he manufactured particularly from Chunar. Chunar is a place in present day Mirzapur. It is located near present day Allahabad, Varanasi regions. From here, he transported these pillars into different parts of the country and he erected these pillars with these edicts. If we see, Chunar is located here, he manufactured, then this is a Gangetic Valley. Gangetic Valley, rivers. He carried these pillars across these rivers, and if you observe, the pillar edicts are located in this location. Pillar edicts are not located in other parts of the country. Only exception is Kandahar Pillar Edict. Remaining all pillars are located in the Gangetic Valley and up to this region, Terai region. These are the areas where these can be carried because the weight of pillars was so huge. Existing rivers and transportation system was used to carry these pillars. When it comes to major rock, he erected these major rocks in the boundaries. Boundaries like Sopara, Girinar, Dhauli Chaugada region and northwestern, northern part, southern part. In this location, he issued these inscriptions. In the boundaries, with the inscriptions, the places where he inscribed these edicts also you can see. These rock edicts, major rock edicts on the boundaries. When it comes to pillar edicts, he issued we discovered these pillar inscriptions near Gangetic Valley. They are showing the extent of one information from the edict is that it shows the extent of Mauryan Empire. If these inscriptions are there in the northwestern part of India and eastern part, it shows the extent of the Mauryan Empire. In the boundary areas you find major rock, in the Gangetic Valley you find pillar edicts. These are the different aspects about inscription. Type of inscriptions, minor, major, pillar and rock edicts. The essence of edict is how a person should conduct in family and in society. He mentioned about it, and he had a kind of pan-Indian perspective and unity and diversity concept. He propagated the ideals in order to live peacefully. The people, they should follow non-violence and they should respect the beliefs of fellow citizens or fellow people. These are the different aspects about the edicts and the major essence. One important point with respect to prelims is, here we have seen, his edicts are mentioning Devanampiya Piyadasi, Devanampiya, Ashoka, only few edicts are giving this information. Till 1915, we do not know that Piyadasi is same as Ashoka. There were so many kings in the country. Some of the inscriptions are there in the name of Devanampiya Piyadasi. So the archaeologists were thinking that Devanampiya Piyadasi could be a ruler, not Ashoka. Maybe there are so many rulers. One king name might be Devanampiya Piyadasi. He issued these inscriptions. But the real link, this puzzle was solved in 1915 when an inscription in Maski in Karnataka was discovered. This is very important for prelims. Maski inscription. For the first time, this is minor rock edict. In this minor rock edict, the name Ashoka is mentioned. This one, and also corroborating with Sri Lanka, Sri Lankan text, Buddhist text, there it is said Piyadasi. Ashoka was named, another name for Ashoka, he used the title Piyadasi. Comparing this minor rock edict of Maski and Sri Lankan text, Buddhist text, it is identified that Devanampiya Piyadasi was none other than Ashoka. So this was major breakthrough in identifying that these inscriptions are belong to the Ashoka regime. This was discovered in 1915. Musky is the location. This is important with respect to prelims. One more important for prelims is these are the language of the inscriptions. While dealing with Iranian invasions and Greek invasions, we have seen that this area, Greek people, Greek script was there. Iran people, that is Aramaic script. Aramaic script. Aramaic script is related to Iranian people, Greek. Here it is Brahmi script. Brahmi script. Ashoka issued most of the edicts in Brahmi script. However, we could read only Brahmi script in 1837. A British official, James Prinsep. He was the one, very important for prelims, who deciphered Brahmi script. Remember, Indus Valley also we have script. Still, Indus Valley script is not deciphered, whereas Brahmi script is deciphered in 1837 by James Prinsep. Very important for prelims. James Prinsep was the one who deciphered Brahmi script. However, the inscriptions are not given only in Brahmi script. They are not given only in Brahmi script. They are issued in Greek script also, Kharoshthi script also. Kharoshthi, combination of Aramaic and Brahmi. This we have seen in Iranian invasions. These are the four important scripts in which Ashoka issued inscriptions. Brahmi script, Kharoshthi script, Greek script and Aramaic script. When it comes to language, he issued Prakrit language. During that time, it was the Prakrit language of the common people. It shows he did not use Sanskrit, the light language. He issued common language so that common people can understand the principles of Dhamma. With inscriptions, we can learn these many things. We can learn about the geographical boundaries of Ashoka, the language of different locations. In northwestern part of Kharoshthi script was used. That means in this location, this language was used. This script was popular. In case of subcontinent, Brahmi script and Prakrit language was used. This shows what kind of language they were using in that particular point of time. In case of pillar edicts, only in Gangetic Valley, because these are very large pillars, very difficult to carry into different parts, only limited for Gangetic Valley. Major rock, major pillar edicts, the language of these edicts, who deciphered Brahmi script, James Prinsep. This is 1837, and in 1915, one more breakthrough, that is knowing Ashoka name from Musky. So Musky is important, James Prinsep is important, Brahmi script is important, and pillar and major rock edicts. So these are various aspects about inscriptions. We started with what we have started. Now recap. We started with the geography. Always remember Indian map and who are the neighbors. The time period and Indian map is very essential in understanding our history. This time period, who are the neighbors, who are the political developments within the country. Once you remember geography, you will come to know. Then when it comes to society, what kind of society was there, how the evolution of society was going on. Then what kind of agriculture, trade, industry, ports, economy wise. In order to administer in these circumstances, a peculiar kind of administration is required. According to the needs of the time, they have created a centralized administration with a lot of officials. Then he followed art and culture as well. Ashoka, we are coming. When it comes to art and culture, Ashoka inscriptions, we talk about it. And Ajivika sect, cave, Barabar caves, Nagarjuni hills, Lomashrishi hills, these are located near Barabar caves. These are dedicated for Ajivika. And also when it comes to stupas, he was a patron of Buddhism. He created some stupas as well. Stupas are remembering the death of Buddha. Buddha's relics were taken, and on the top of these relics, stupas were created. One important stupa during Mauryan time period is Sanchi Stupa. The foundation for Sanchi Stupa was laid here. Then after that, different dynasties after Maurya Shungas came, they enhanced the stupa. Then Ashoka, the Shastavahanas also for some time ruled Ujjaini area, they enhanced this area. Sanchi is located near Ujjaini region in Madhya Pradesh near Ujjain. Vidisha or Sanchi. Sanchi is very important place. It has also connected with Ashoka. When he was a prince, before becoming the emperor, Ashoka was the provincial governor of Ujjaini area. And he also married one lady, Devi, her name Devi, married from Vidisha region located near Sanchi. With his marriage, he got two children. One is Mahendra, another one Sangamitra. For Buddhism, these two people are very important because these two people were sent to Sri Lanka to propagate Buddhism. They became ambassadors for propagating Dhammagosha or Buddhism in order to propagate the ideals of Dhamma and Buddhism. Mahendra and Sangamitra, they were chosen as ambassadors of Ashoka. They were sent to Sri Lanka. These two children are from the marriage of a lady from Sanchi or Vidisha region. That is how the Sanchi region is connected with royal family. Naturally, it got patronage from the local royal family, and gradually Sanchi Stupa became one of the iconic stupas in the entire Indian stupa structures. So Sanchi Stupa during Mauryan time period is very important. Inscriptions, Barabar caves, Ajivika sect, Sanchi Stupa, and pillars also. Pillar construction, these are manufactured near Chunar. Chunar is important for prelims. Chunar near Allahabad, present day Allahabad, and Mirzapur area to be specific. These are about art and culture of Mauryas. If you know the geography and if you know the history or life story of Chandragupta Maurya, Bimbisara and Ashoka, all the other dimensions you can connect and you can answer in the question, both in prelims as well as in mains. With respect to mains, mostly in case of GS mains questions about the society under what circumstances Ashoka propagated Dhamma, then you should connect what kind of society was there already, how society is evolving over a period of time. You always think when it comes to society right from beginning from Stone Age, Indus Valley, early Vedic, Mahajanapada period, then different philosophies. You can connect the society in different dimensions. That is how it evolved. So these are various aspects which we need to remember in case of Mauryan Empire. World map, Chandragupta Maurya, Indian map and different areas, different people involved in Chandragupta Maurya's lifetime, Bimbisara, Ashoka, different social circumstances and different economic developments during the regime, and Ashoka lifetime and how the economy improved. In case of administration, central administration. Finally, we have seen the sources how to remember the sources. One way of remembering sources through lifetime of different kings, and also in a different categories: literary sources, indigenous, foreign, and archaeology, inscription, forts, caves. These are related to the inscriptions in different locations: major rock, major pillar, and the essence of edicts. This is how the Nanda Empire, when Alexander reached northwestern part of India, this was the empire. When it comes to this is the empire when during Ashoka time period. This is how the empire enlarged from Magadha Janapada period to the Ashokan time period. Chandragupta Maurya, Chandragupta, and Ashoka. This is Ashoka. Maximum extent of empire reached during Ashoka time period. After Ashoka, once again disintegrated. That we see in the next class, that is post-Mauryan period. So these are various dimensions in Mauryan empire. Thank you.